In the oldest memory of existence, before poetry gave voice to wonder, before temples rose toward the heavens, and before the first mortal ever spoke a name, there was only chaos. It was not merely darkness, nor an empty space waiting to be filled, but an infinite void without form, time, or purpose, where existence itself remained only a possibility. From this immeasurable emptiness emerged the first primordial powers, ancient beings whose very presence became the foundation upon which reality would be built. The first to awaken was Gaia, the eternal earth, whose vast body became the mountains, valleys, forests, rivers, and fertile lands that would one day nurture every living creature. Beneath her stretched Tartarus, a boundless abyss so deep that even eternity seemed to vanish within its unfathomable depths. A place where the oldest forces of creation would one day be imprisoned. Last came Nyx, the primordial night, cloaked in a darkness so absolute that it swallowed both light and silence, embodying mysteries that neither gods nor mortals would ever fully understand. Together, these ancient beings formed the earliest architecture of the universe, establishing the foundations from which every future age would emerge. From Gaia and Uranus came the Titans, colossal rulers whose strength and authority shaped the first great era of the cosmos. They governed the heavens and the earth with unquestioned dominance, believing their reign would last forever. Yet, while they forged order across the visible world, another destiny was quietly taking shape beyond their notice, hidden within the unseen currents of fate. It belonged not to a future conqueror of kingdoms or a god seeking glory beneath the open sky, but to one whose purpose would forever be tied to silence, inevitability, and the eternal boundary between life and death. That child was Hades. Born to the Titan king Kronos and his queen Rhea, Hades entered existence as one of the heirs to unimaginable divine power. Yet, even before his first breath, his destiny had already begun to diverge from that of his siblings. Unlike Zeus, whose future would blaze across the heavens, or Poseidon, whose dominion would stretch across the restless seas, Hades was unknowingly bound to something far older than kingship or conquest. His fate reached back toward the primordial darkness that had existed long before the Olympian gods would ever claim their thrones. His life, however, began not with celebration, but with fear. An ancient prophecy had warned Kronos that one of his own children would one day overthrow him, just as he himself had once overthrown his father, Uranus. Terrified that history would repeat itself, Kronos chose to challenge destiny itself. Instead of raising his children, he devoured each of them the moment they were born, believing that if they never entered the world, the prophecy could never be fulfilled. Hestia vanished first into the darkness of his body, followed by Demeter, Hera, and then Hades, each swallowed whole before they could even witness the light of the world. For Hades, existence began inside an impossible prison. There was no horizon, no sky, no earth beneath his feet, no movement, and no distinction between one moment and the next. He knew only endless darkness, suffocating silence, and the slow, crushing weight of time passing without beginning or end. Unlike his brothers and sisters, who would later remember freedom before hardship, Hades knew confinement before he knew life itself. Yet, the very prison meant to erase him became the place that forged his character. In endless stillness, he learned patience beyond measure. In complete silence, he found clarity instead of fear. Time ceased to be something that hurried forward and instead became an endless current, teaching him that all things, regardless of their strength or permanence, were destined to change. Long before he would ever rule the underworld, Hades came to understand a truth that few gods would ever fully accept. Every beginning carries within it the certainty of an ending. Every victory eventually fades into memory, Every kingdom crumbles beneath the passage of time. Every age, no matter how magnificent, ultimately gives way to another. Even immortals could not stand beyond the reach of destiny. This realization did not make him bitter, nor did it fill him with sorrow. Instead, it gave him a calm unlike any possessed by the other gods. While ambition would drive some and glory would consume others, Hades learned acceptance. Where others sought power, he found purpose. Where others feared endings, he recognized them as an essential part of existence itself. Without knowing it, Kronos was accomplishing the very thing he hoped to prevent. By imprisoning Hades within endless darkness, he was shaping the one god uniquely suited to govern the realm where every life would eventually arrive. Deep within that silent prison, long before the Olympians rose to power, long before the Titans fell, and long before the world understood the meaning of death, the future king of the Underworld was already becoming exactly what fate had always intended him to be. When Zeus was finally born, Rhea could no longer bear the fate that had consumed her children. Determined to break the prophecy's cruel cycle, she hid her youngest son on the island of Crete and presented Kronos with a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. Blinded by fear and convinced he had once again defeated destiny, Kronos swallowed the stone without question. Far from the Titan King's reach, Zeus was raised in secret, protected by loyal guardians, and nurtured until he grew into a powerful and cunning young god. Every passing year brought the prophecy closer to fulfillment, and when Zeus was finally strong enough to challenge his father, he understood that victory would require more than strength alone. Through wisdom, strategy, and divine assistance, he forced Kronos to disgorge the children he had imprisoned for countless years. One by one, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon emerged from the darkness, stepping into a world they had never truly known. For Hades, the experience was unlike anything language could fully capture. After what felt like an eternity surrounded by absolute darkness, the brilliance of the open sky was almost unbearable. Light flooded his vision for the first time. The earth stretched endlessly beneath his feet. Mountains towered in every direction, and the heavens seemed impossibly vast compared to the prison that had shaped his existence. Around him stood his brothers and sisters, equally overwhelmed by the reality of freedom, each trying to comprehend a world that had continued without them. Though they had shared the same imprisonment, Hades experienced that first moment differently from the others. His siblings looked upon the world with the excitement of those beginning a new life. Zeus already carried the confidence of a leader destined to change the course of history, while Poseidon's spirit seemed naturally drawn toward the restless horizons where sea met sky. Hades, however, felt no overwhelming joy, nor any desire to celebrate his freedom. Instead, he carried with him the silence that had defined his earliest existence. He had not simply escaped confinement, he had returned from a place where time itself seemed to stand still. The endless years inside Kronos had left an imprint that no victory could erase. They had taught him patience beyond measure, endurance without complaint, and a perspective unlike that of any other god. It was during those first moments beneath the open heavens that an invisible distance quietly formed between Hades and his brothers. Zeus instinctively lifted his eyes toward the sky, already imagining a kingdom among the clouds. Poseidon gazed toward the distant seas, sensing the call of waves that seemed to recognize him before he even claimed them. Hades, however, found his attention drawn elsewhere. His eyes wandered toward the shadows beneath towering cliffs, toward the mouths of ancient caves where sunlight struggled to enter, toward the deep places hidden beneath the earth where silence still ruled. He could not explain why those forgotten places felt strangely familiar, only that they awakened something within him that no open landscape ever could. Yet, there was little time to dwell upon these feelings. Kronos remained king of the Titans, and his rule over the cosmos was far from over. The prophecy had been set in motion, but its fulfillment would demand far more than the liberation of his imprisoned children. Across the world, the Titans still stood as the unquestioned masters of creation, their immense strength forged in the earliest age of existence. They had ruled for so long that few could even imagine their defeat. Mountains, seas, and heavens alike had long answered to their authority, and they had no intention of surrendering that power to a younger generation of gods. The tension spread across the cosmos like the silence before an approaching storm. Every force of creation seemed to sense that an ancient order was beginning to fracture. Hades stood beside Zeus and Poseidon as the first signs of rebellion emerged, yet even then he remained remarkably composed. Unlike Zeus, whose determination burned with fierce ambition, or Poseidon, whose spirit surged with restless energy, Hades sought neither glory nor recognition. He understood that some battles are fought not for personal desire, but because the natural order leaves no other path. The years spent imprisoned had taught him that patience often outlasted rage, and that true strength did not always reveal itself through noise or spectacle. While others prepared themselves with visions of triumph, Hades entered the coming conflict with quiet resolve. He carried no dream of crowns or conquest, only the certainty that the tyranny born from fear could not endure forever. Without fully realizing it, every step he now took brought him closer to the destiny that had been waiting for him since the first moments of creation. The age of the Titans was nearing its end, and the greatest war the gods would ever fight was about to reshape the cosmos forever. The rebellion against the Titans did not begin with a single battle, nor with one decisive act of defiance. It began as a quiet shift in the balance of the universe, a subtle change that even the oldest powers could feel. The age of Kronos had endured for so long that it seemed eternal. The Titans ruled the heavens, the seas, and the earth with absolute confidence, believing that no force could ever challenge the order they had established. Yet, the moment Kronos' children stepped back into the world, the certainty of that ancient age began to fracture. Prophecy had survived every attempt to destroy it, and destiny was now moving with unstoppable purpose. Zeus called upon his brothers and sisters to stand beside him, knowing that the Titans would never surrender their power willingly. Hades answered without hesitation. He did not fight out of vengeance for the years stolen from him, nor did he seek glory or recognition. He understood that some conflicts are not born from hatred, but from necessity. If the world was ever to move forward, the old order had to end. Thus began the Titanomachy, the greatest war the cosmos would ever witness. The earth itself trembled beneath the weight of armies unlike anything that would ever exist again. Mountains split apart beneath colossal blows, valleys collapsed into enormous chasms, and the seas crashed against newly formed shores as the forces of creation clashed in open war. The sky burned with storms, unlike any that would ever appear again, illuminated by the first flashes of Zeus's growing power. Across the battlefield stood the Titans, towering figures whose strength had been forged during the earliest days of existence. They fought with the confidence of rulers who had never known defeat, believing that the younger gods could never overcome the might of those who had shaped the world itself. Yet the Olympians possessed something their enemies had long forgotten: the willingness to change. While Zeus led openly from the front, inspiring his allies with thunder and determination, Hades entered the conflict with a completely different presence. He did not seek attention. He watched, observed, and learned. Years spent imprisoned inside Kronos had taught him that victory rarely belonged to the loudest warrior. Battles were often decided by patience, precision, and the ability to understand what others overlooked. Even amid the chaos of war, Hades remained calm, studying every movement across the battlefield before committing himself to action. His composure never wavered, even as mountains crumbled around him and rivers changed their course beneath the violence of the conflict. Before the war had fully unfolded, the balance shifted in favor of the younger gods through the arrival of unexpected allies. Deep within Tartarus, Zeus freed the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, ancient beings whom the Titans themselves had imprisoned ages before. Grateful for their liberation, the Cyclopes repaid the Olympians by forging divine weapons unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Zeus received the thunderbolt, a weapon capable of tearing the heavens apart with unimaginable force. Poseidon was given the trident, whose power commanded every ocean and shook the foundations of the earth. Hades, however, received something far more subtle and perhaps even more terrifying: the helm of invisibility. Forged in darkness older than memory itself, the helmet granted its wearer complete invisibility, allowing them to move unseen through any battlefield. Yet its true power extended beyond simply hiding its bearer. It concealed intention, erased presence, and transformed certainty into fear. An enemy could not defend against what could neither be seen nor anticipated. When Hades placed the helm upon his head for the first time, he experienced no sense of surprise. Instead, it felt strangely familiar, as though he were returning to something that had always belonged to him. The darkness embraced him like a second skin, surrounding him with the same silence that had shaped his earliest existence inside Kronos. For the first time, Hades realized that his greatest strength would never be overwhelming force. It would be patience, precision, and the quiet certainty that no enemy could escape what they could never perceive. While Zeus became the face of rebellion and Poseidon embodied overwhelming power, Hades became something far more elusive. He moved through the battlefield like a whisper carried by shadow, striking only when the moment was perfect. Titans vanished without understanding how they had fallen. Commanders disappeared from the heart of their armies, leaving confusion and fear in their wake. Strategies collapsed, not because they had been defeated openly, but because their architects were gone before anyone realized danger had arrived. Among the Titans, rumors began to spread of an unseen presence moving silently through the war, a force more unsettling than thunder or earthquakes because it offered no warning. Hades never celebrated these victories, nor did he seek admiration for them. Each battle simply confirmed what he had already learned long ago. The greatest power is often the one that remains unseen. As the war stretched into years, consuming generation after generation of immortal warriors, the Olympians slowly gained ground. Yet, even amid victory, Hades found himself growing increasingly distant from the world above. While others dreamed of the kingdoms they would one day rule, he discovered little satisfaction in conquest itself. Every battlefield reminded him that even the mightiest beings eventually fall, and every triumph carried within it the quiet certainty that another ending would inevitably follow. Without realizing it, the war was preparing him for a kingdom unlike any other, a realm not built upon glory or conquest, but upon the eternal truth that every story, no matter how magnificent, must one day come to its end. The war raged across the cosmos for 10 relentless years, transforming the young world into a battlefield where mountains were shattered, seas were driven beyond their shores, and the heavens themselves seemed ready to collapse beneath the violence of immortal conflict. Every passing year demanded greater sacrifices from both sides. The Titans fought with the confidence of rulers who had shaped the first age of existence, while the Olympians battled with the determination of those who knew that failure meant the end of every hope for a new order. Neither side showed mercy, for this was not simply a struggle for power, but a war that would determine the future of the universe itself. Zeus unleashed thunderbolts that illuminated the sky with blinding brilliance, each strike capable of reducing mountains to rubble. Poseidon commanded the oceans with terrifying force, raising walls of water that swept across entire armies and split the earth beneath the Titans' feet. Yet while his brothers dominated the battlefield Through overwhelming displays of power, Hades continued to wage war in a very different way. Hidden beneath the helm of invisibility, he became an unseen presence, moving silently through the chaos, striking where no one expected and disappearing before his enemies even realized they had been attacked. Titans who had commanded armies for centuries suddenly vanished without explanation. Generals fell in the middle of issuing orders, their soldiers left confused and leaderless. Entire battle formations collapsed because the minds directing them were eliminated before the fighting had truly begun. Panic slowly spread among the Titans. They had faced thunder, earthquakes, and storms before, but they had never encountered an enemy who could not be seen, tracked, or anticipated. Fear of the unknown proved more destructive than any weapon forged by the Cyclopes. Whispers spread through their ranks of a silent hunter who appeared without warning and disappeared without leaving even a shadow behind. Many began looking over their shoulders even in moments of calm, never certain whether Hades was already standing beside them. Yet Hades never fought to inspire terror. Fear was merely the consequence of his methods, not their purpose. Every movement he made was deliberate, every strike carefully chosen, every action guided by discipline rather than emotion. He understood that victory belonged not to those who acted recklessly, but to those who remained patient while others surrendered to chaos. Years spent imprisoned within Kronos had taught him that endurance was often stronger than fury, and nowhere was that lesson more valuable than on the battlefield. As the war continued, the Titans revealed the full extent of their ancient power. Atlas led devastating assaults that forced the younger gods into retreat on more than one occasion, his immense strength making him seem almost impossible to overcome. Hyperion summoned blazing storms that turned entire landscapes into fields of fire, while Iapetus wielded weapons forged during the earliest moments of creation, each strike capable of tearing apart the foundations of the earth itself. Above them all stood Kronos, fighting with the desperation of a king who knew that defeat would end not only his reign, but an entire age. Armed with his legendary sickle, he carved enormous fractures across the world, each blow leaving scars that would remain long after the war had ended. There were moments when victory seemed impossible. During one of the fiercest campaigns, the Olympians found themselves trapped near the stronghold of Mount Othrys, surrounded by overwhelming Titan forces. Zeus's lightning had begun to lose its relentless intensity after years of continuous battle, while Poseidon fought far from the seas that strengthened his power. Even the gods who had stood beside them since the beginning of the rebellion struggled to hold their ground. The Titans advanced from every direction, convinced that the rebellion was finally approaching its end. Yet while their attention remained fixed on the battlefield, Hades had already vanished. Invisible beneath his helm, he slipped behind enemy lines without leaving the slightest trace of his presence. Moving through the heart of the Titan defenses, he reached the places where the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires had once been imprisoned, ensuring that every ally capable of turning the tide of battle remained free to fight. From there, he continued striking key positions throughout the Titan ranks, dismantling their defenses from within with the same calm precision that had become his greatest weapon. By the time the Titans realized what was happening, confusion had already spread throughout their forces. Their coordinated attacks dissolved into disorder, allowing Zeus and Poseidon to regain the initiative. Thunder once again shook the heavens, the seas surged forward with renewed fury, and the Olympians pressed their advantage across the battlefield. Even then, Hades remained almost invisible within the story of the war itself. He never sought praise for the victories his actions made possible, nor did he consider himself the hero of the conflict. While others measured success through triumph and celebration, Hades saw only another reminder that even the strongest rulers, the oldest kingdoms, and the mightiest warriors would eventually reach their end. With every Titan who fell, his understanding deepened. The battlefield was teaching him the same lesson that darkness had whispered to him inside Kronos so many years before. Nothing, no matter how ancient or powerful, escapes the certainty of change. Without knowing it, every victory brought him one step closer to accepting the role that destiny had been preparing for him since the beginning of time. A ruler not of conquest, but of the eternal balance that follows every ending. The final battle came with a force that seemed capable of tearing creation itself apart. After a decade of relentless warfare, the Titans and the Olympians gathered for one last confrontation, each knowing that the conflict could not continue forever. The universe had reached its breaking point. Mountains had been reduced to shattered stone. Rivers had carved entirely new paths across the earth. Forests had vanished beneath fire, and the heavens echoed constantly with thunder and the cries of immortal warriors. Every corner of existence bore the scars of the Titanomachy, and the outcome of this single battle would determine whether the old age endured or whether an entirely new order would rise from its ruins. Kronos fought with unmatched fury, refusing to surrender the throne he had seized from Uranus so many ages before. He understood better than anyone that defeat meant more than the loss of power. It meant the end of an era, the collapse of everything the Titans had built, and the fulfillment of the prophecy he had spent countless years trying to escape. Every blow he struck carried the desperation of a ruler battling against fate itself. Zeus answered with equal determination, hurling thunderbolts that split the sky into rivers of blinding light. The heavens shook beneath every impact, while Poseidon drove enormous waves across the battlefield, breaking Titan formations and shaking the very foundations of the world. Yet even amid this overwhelming display of power, Hades remained almost impossible to perceive. Hidden beneath the helm of invisibility, he moved silently through the chaos, watching every shift in the battle with the patience that had always defined him. While others focused on defeating the strongest opponents before them, Hades searched for the moment that would decide everything. He knew that wars are rarely won by strength alone. They are won when the balance finally tips beyond recovery. As the fighting reached its most violent stage, the Hecatoncheires entered the battle with devastating force. Their 100 arms hurled enormous boulders across the battlefield without pause, crushing Titan strongholds and breaking defenses that had stood for centuries. Entire mountains collapsed beneath the endless barrage, forcing the Titans into positions they could no longer defend. For the first time since the war had begun, the ancient rulers found themselves steadily losing control. Confusion spread through their ranks as the Olympians pressed forward from every direction. Zeus unleashed storm after storm. Poseidon shattered the ground beneath his enemies, and Hades continued dismantling the Titans' remaining strategies from within, ensuring that every attempt to regroup dissolved before it could succeed. Eventually, the resistance broke. One after another, the Titans fell. Some surrendered, while others fought until they could no longer stand. Atlas, whose immense strength had inspired generations of Titan warriors, was finally overwhelmed. Hyperion and the other great leaders were defeated as the battlefield that had once belonged to them passed into the hands of the younger gods. At the center of it all stood Kronos, facing the unavoidable truth he had spent his entire existence trying to prevent. The prophecy had prevailed. Every act committed to escape destiny had only guided him toward its fulfillment. When the battle finally ended, silence settled across the shattered world. For the first time in 10 years, the thunder faded, the oceans grew calm, and the earth ceased trembling beneath the weight of war. The victory belonged to the Olympians, but there was little celebration. The cost had been too great. The world they inherited had been transformed forever, and countless immortal beings had fallen in a conflict unlike anything that would ever be fought again. The defeated Titans were cast into Tartarus, the same immeasurable abyss that had existed since the beginning of creation. There they were imprisoned behind massive bronze gates, watched over by the Hecatoncheires, so that they could never again threaten the balance of the cosmos. It was a punishment both severe and symbolic. The rulers who had once governed the universe without challenge would now spend eternity in the deepest darkness beneath the earth. As the dust of war slowly settled, a new question emerged. The universe had been won, but it still required order. The heavens, the seas, and the unseen realms all needed rulers capable of preserving the balance that had been purchased through so much sacrifice. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades stood together not as warriors preparing for another battle, but as brothers about to determine the future of creation itself. None of them could claim complete ownership of the victory, for each had contributed in a different way. Zeus had inspired and led the rebellion. Poseidon had broken the Titan's strength through overwhelming force, and Hades had quietly shaped countless decisive moments that made victory possible. The age of war was over, but an even more important decision now awaited them. It would not be made through combat or conquest, but through fate itself, and that choice would determine the destiny of each brother for all eternity. When the echoes of war finally faded, the three victorious brothers faced a decision that would shape the destiny of the universe for all eternity. The Titans had fallen, the old order had been destroyed, and the cosmos could no longer remain without rulers. Countless lands stretched before them, each requiring guidance, protection, and authority. Rather than allowing ambition or rivalry to ignite another conflict, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades chose a different path. They entrusted the decision to fate itself. Lots were cast, not as a game of chance, but as an acknowledgement that the balance of creation was greater than the desires of any single god. Each brother accepted that whatever realm he received would become both his responsibility and his eternal burden. When the lots were drawn, Zeus claimed dominion over the heavens. The endless sky, the clouds, the storms, and the seat of divine authority became his kingdom. It was a realm perfectly suited to his commanding nature, a place from which he could govern both gods and mortals while watching over the entire world from above. Poseidon received the seas, inheriting every ocean, river, and coastline. The waters answered to his will, reflecting both his immense strength and his unpredictable spirit. Together, the heavens and the oceans formed kingdoms of extraordinary beauty and limitless power, realms that inspired admiration from gods and mortals alike. Then came Hades. The final lot granted him dominion over the Underworld, the hidden realm beneath the earth where the souls of the dead would spend eternity. To many, it appeared to be the least desirable of the three kingdoms. Unlike the heavens, it held no brilliant light. Unlike the seas, it offered no endless horizons or living landscapes. It was a silent domain, separated forever from the warmth of the world above, a place where every mortal life ultimately came to its conclusion. Some later myths would claim that Hades was disappointed or cheated by this outcome, suggesting that he resented his brothers for receiving more glorious realms. Yet, the oldest traditions tell a different story. Hades did not protest. He did not argue, demand another share, or question the fairness of fate. He accepted the result with the same quiet composure that had defined him since the moment he first emerged from the darkness inside Kronos. More than anyone else, he understood that every realm carried responsibilities invisible to those who envied them. Zeus would forever bear the weight of ruling both gods and men, constantly resolving disputes and defending his authority against rebellion. Poseidon would struggle endlessly against the untamable nature of the seas, whose calm could become devastation without warning. Hades, meanwhile, accepted a responsibility unlike any other. Every mortal who had ever lived, and every mortal who would ever exist, would eventually arrive within his kingdom. No one could escape it. Kings, warriors, poets, beggars, heroes, children, and emperors would all walk the same final road beneath his watch. It was not a kingdom of conquest, but of inevitability. It demanded neither glory nor admiration. It demanded justice, patience, and absolute impartiality. Standing at the threshold of his new realm, Hades did not see only darkness. He saw purpose. The silence surrounding the underworld was strangely familiar, echoing the stillness that had shaped his earliest existence long before he had ever seen the sky. Where others saw isolation, he recognized order. Where others imagined despair, he understood necessity. Death was not an enemy of life, but its completion, the final chapter without which existence itself would lose all meaning. Every birth carried within it the certainty of an ending, and someone had to preserve the balance between the two. That responsibility now belonged to him. Without complaint or hesitation, Hades descended into the depths beneath the earth to claim the kingdom that no other god desired, but that only he could truly govern. As he crossed the threshold, separating the living world from the realm below, he left behind not only the sunlight, but also the endless rivalries that often consumed the Olympians. While Zeus would rule from Mount Olympus and Poseidon from his magnificent palaces beneath the sea, Hades would build his throne in a place untouched by ambition, where wealth, beauty, strength, and status held no power over the final judgment awaiting every soul. In that moment, he ceased to be merely one of the three brothers who had overthrown the Titans. He became something far greater and far more enduring, the eternal guardian of the boundary that separates life from death, the silent king whose kingdom would one day welcome every living being, including the very gods who now celebrated beneath the open sky. As Hades descended into his newly claimed kingdom, he entered a world unlike any other in creation. It was not a place of chaos, nor a prison built for endless torment, as later generations would often imagine. The underworld existed as a vast and carefully ordered realm, ancient beyond comprehension, and governed by laws as unchanging as time itself. Hidden deep beneath the surface of the earth, far beyond the reach of sunlight, it stretched across endless plains, silent valleys, shadowed rivers, and immense caverns whose limits even the gods could scarcely comprehend. This was not simply the destination of the dead. It was a kingdom with its own structure, its own geography, and its own eternal rhythm, where every soul arrived according to the same universal law, regardless of the life it had lived. Upon entering his domain, Hades did not seek to transform it into something brighter or more glorious. He understood that its purpose required neither beauty nor spectacle. The underworld existed to preserve balance, and balance demanded order above all else. While the living measured existence through ambition, wealth, and power, none of those distinctions carried meaning here. Every soul crossed the same threshold. Every king stood beside peasants. Every conqueror walked the same roads as those they had once ruled. Death erased the illusions that separated mortals during life, leaving only the truth of who they had been. Hades accepted this responsibility with unwavering resolve, dedicating himself to maintaining a kingdom where justice would never be influenced by status, fear, or favor. His throne was established within a magnificent palace, forged from black stone and precious metals, hidden beneath the earth since the beginning of creation. Unlike the shining halls of Olympus, this palace reflected neither sunlight nor dazzling colors. Its beauty lay in its solemn grandeur, illuminated by an eerie glow that seemed to emerge naturally from the ancient rock itself. Vast columns disappeared into darkness overhead, while silent corridors stretched endlessly through chambers that echoed only with the footsteps of immortal guardians and the quiet arrival of newly departed souls. Every part of the palace reflected the character of its ruler, disciplined, timeless, and untouched by vanity. Hades did not surround himself with endless celebrations or lavish displays of power. His authority required no performance. It was absolute because it rested upon the one truth that no living creature could ever escape. The kingdom itself was divided into many regions, each serving a different purpose within the eternal order. The Asphodel Meadows became the resting place for ordinary souls, where countless spirits wandered peacefully through endless fields, neither rewarded with extraordinary joy nor punished with suffering. It was here that the majority of humanity found its eternal home, living in quiet reflection beyond the struggles and ambitions of mortal existence. For those whose lives had been marked by extraordinary courage, virtue, or heroic achievement, there existed the Elysian Fields, a realm of serenity and everlasting peace, where blessed souls enjoyed an existence free from pain and sorrow. At the opposite extreme lay Tartarus, the deepest abyss of the underworld, separated even from the lands of the dead themselves. This was not Hades' kingdom in the ordinary sense, but an ancient prison reserved for those whose crimes threatened the very fabric of cosmic order. Here the defeated Titans remained confined beneath the watch of the Hecatoncheires, while other beings whose actions had defied divine justice endured punishments intended not simply as vengeance, but as eternal reminders of the consequences of absolute arrogance. Between these realms flowed the great rivers of the underworld, each possessing a purpose essential to the journey of every soul. The river Styx formed the sacred boundary separating the world of the living from the kingdom of the dead, its dark waters carrying oaths so powerful that even the Olympian gods dared not break promises sworn upon its name. The river Acheron bore newly departed souls toward their final destination, guided across its silent waters by Charon, the mysterious ferryman whose task never ceased. The river Lethe offered forgetfulness, allowing certain souls to release the memories of mortal life before continuing their eternal existence. Other rivers wound through the vast darkness as well, each representing a different aspect of sorrow, memory, suffering, or purification, together forming a landscape governed by principles older than Olympus itself. Standing above this immense and perfectly ordered kingdom, Hades understood that he ruled the largest realm in existence. Zeus governed the heavens, Poseidon commanded the seas, but every generation of humanity would eventually pass into his care. His subjects increased with every passing moment, not through conquest, but through the simple and unavoidable passage of time. Yet despite ruling a kingdom greater than those of his brothers combined, Hades never viewed himself as the most powerful among them. His purpose was not domination, but stewardship. He existed to ensure that the great cycle of existence continued without interruption, that every soul reached its rightful destination, and that the balance between life and death remained unbroken. While the gods above celebrated beneath the light of Olympus, Hades quietly began the work that would continue for all eternity, governing a kingdom few would ever understand, but upon which the order of the entire universe ultimately depended. In the first ages of his reign, Hades discovered that ruling the underworld required far more than claiming a throne. A kingdom built to receive every soul that would ever exist could not depend on power alone. It demanded structure, patience, and laws that would remain unchanged long after civilizations above had risen and fallen. The realm beneath the earth was immense, but it was still little more than an unshaped expanse waiting for purpose. Hades understood that if souls arrived without guidance, the underworld would become a place of endless confusion rather than eternal order. And so, quietly, without proclamation or ceremony, he began the greatest act of creation of his life. He walked the vast darkness alone, mapping pathways that no mortal eye would ever see. Wherever he stepped, the kingdom slowly revealed its form. Ancient caverns became roads for wandering spirits. Silent plains stretched into places of peaceful rest, and invisible boundaries emerged to separate each region according to its purpose. Nothing was built for spectacle. Every feature existed because it served the balance that governed life and death. The first great task was shaping the rivers that would define every soul's journey. The river Styx became the unbreakable boundary between the living world and the realm of the dead, its dark waters carrying an authority so absolute that even the Olympian gods would fear to violate an oath sworn upon its name. The river Acheron emerged as the river of sorrow, carrying newly departed souls away from mortal existence toward the judgments awaiting them. Its waters did not punish, but they reflected the grief that accompanied every farewell. Phlegethon flowed as a river of living fire, not to destroy but to purify, burning away hatred, violence, and the lingering corruption that some spirits carried with them. Cocytus echoed with the laments of regret, while Lethe offered the gift of forgetfulness, allowing memories that chained souls to mortal life to fade gently until peace became possible. Together, these rivers formed the circulatory system of the underworld, each serving a purpose within an order that no force, mortal or divine, was meant to disrupt. Yet, rivers alone could not govern eternity. Every soul required judgment, and judgment demanded wisdom free from emotion. Hades therefore entrusted this responsibility to three legendary judges whose mortal lives had already demonstrated exceptional fairness. Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus took their places within the great tribunal, examining every life with complete impartiality. Their task was not to reward popularity or punish weakness, but to weigh actions honestly and determine where each soul truly belonged. Those who had lived honorable and extraordinary lives continued toward the Elysian fields, where peace endured beyond suffering. Ordinary souls found their place within the asphodel meadows, existing in quiet reflection beyond the struggles of mortal existence. Only those whose cruelty had shattered the natural order descended into Tartarus, where consequence, not vengeance, awaited them. Hades watched the judges carefully during the earliest years, ensuring that their decisions remained untouched by pride, sympathy, or personal opinion. Justice, he believed, lost all meaning the moment it became inconsistent. As the foundations of the kingdom took shape, guardians also became necessary. The first was Cerberus, the colossal three-headed hound who emerged from the shadows as though the underworld itself had given physical form to its own instinct for protection. One head remained constantly alert to danger approaching from the world of the living. Another watched those already within the realm. The third sensed disturbances too subtle for ordinary sight, ensuring that neither the dead escaped nor the living entered without rightful purpose. Cerberus did not embody cruelty. He represented certainty. His vigilance guaranteed that the boundary separating life from death remained intact for all eternity. Soon afterward came the Furies, ancient beings whose existence reached back even before the Olympians. They did not serve as instruments of blind punishment, but as guardians of moral consequence. Those who violated sacred oaths, shed innocent blood without remorse, or attempted to escape the justice of the underworld, eventually found themselves pursued by these relentless spirits. Their purpose was never revenge. They existed to preserve the balance upon which every civilization depended. Without consequence, justice would become meaningless, and without justice, neither gods nor mortals could maintain lasting order. Hades welcomed each of these ancient beings, not as servants, but as essential parts of a carefully designed system. His own palace rose slowly from the black stone of the underworld itself, growing naturally from the earth rather than being constructed by force. Massive obsidian pillars supported vaulted ceilings that disappeared into darkness, while endless halls echoed with a silence that never felt empty but purposeful. Unlike the glittering palaces of Olympus, nothing within its walls sought admiration. Every chamber existed because it fulfilled a practical function. Here, Hades reviewed the movement of souls, observed the work of the judges, oversaw the rivers, and maintained the delicate equilibrium upon which both the living and the dead unknowingly depended. Around the palace, the kingdom continued to expand with equal precision. Nyx extended the eternal veil that concealed the underworld from mortal sight. Hypnos established his dwelling near the sacred rivers, allowing dreams to drift gently between sleep and death when the natural order required it. Thanatos, calm and unwavering, became the guide who escorted mortal souls from life into eternity, carrying out his task with compassion rather than violence. Every addition strengthened the harmony of the realm. Piece by piece, the underworld ceased to resemble an empty abyss and became a complete world beneath the world, a kingdom whose invisible order supported the visible one above. As Hades looked across everything he had built, he felt no pride in the ordinary sense. There were no crowds to praise him, no festivals held in his honor, and no songs celebrating his accomplishments. Yet, none of those things mattered. For the first time since his birth, he stood in a place that reflected his own nature perfectly. While Zeus governed through command and Poseidon through overwhelming force, Hades ruled through stability. He had transformed darkness into structure, silence into purpose, and inevitability into justice. In that quiet kingdom beneath the earth, surrounded by rivers that would outlast civilizations and laws that even the gods respected, Hades discovered something rarer than victory or glory. He discovered that he had finally found the place he had always been destined to call home,